This is it, the new spot. I am coming to you from my cozy, nice, lovely little reading nook in our new house that I love to use to chew through some of my physical books. But I decided that for the first video, I wanted to cover my 5 favorite audiobooks that I've listened to. And I want you guys to stick around to the end because this is really just to highlight my number 1 favorite, because you would have never assumed that this actor would suit so perfectly to narrate an audiobook, but they do. And it was such a pleasant surprise, and I want everybody else to listen to it, particularly if you like this genre of literature. So stick around and let's get into the video. So I talked to quite a few people about audiobooks, and I always get the same kind of response from a lot of readers, which is, I just can't do audiobooks. I can't listen to somebody narrate a book to me. It's just not the same thing. And I 100% agree. It isn't really the same thing. And for books that I really want to chew into, I do tend to prefer the physical books. However, audiobooks are a great way to chew through a lot of idle time, whether you're doing the dishes, whether you're cleaning up, working out. I used to commute for at least 1 hour per day. And you can use that 1 hour of commute time per day to idly kind of listen through some podcasts, or you can kind of tackle that TBR pile that you've really been intending and really get a couple of notches under your belt in terms of how many books you've finished throughout the year. Now, the problem with audiobooks is there's a few more dimensions than there are to physical books. Basically, how do we break down what makes a good audiobook? Personally, I think there's a few criteria that we have to look at. One, we have to look at production quality. Now, when it comes to fairly popular books, the production value seems to be fairly good. However, there's some aspects of the audiobook itself, besides how well it's produced, that can really make or break an audiobook. And for me, one of the things is if the narrator doesn't capture the intonation of the writing, if they don't capture the kind of character voice that I think comes through in the book when I'm reading it in my head. It's almost sort of like when you watch a movie, and if you're watching a movie of a book that you really, really love, and they just kind of spoil a character that you didn't envision. They're just kind of not true to the character. One really good example of an audiobook that I found was just a little bit off for me was the audiobook for Grapes of Wrath, wherein the voice acting is actually pretty good, but the sound mixing in terms of the volume between the actual dialogue itself and the harmonica, the screeching harmonica that they would use between the sound breaks, I found that I would have to turn up the volume for the narrator, and then as soon as those scene cuts came in with the harmonica, I would be yanking my headphones out of my ears because it was literally hurting me to listen to. So that's really bothersome. You obviously don't want that out of an audiobook. Now, in terms of cast and production value, you have some phenomenal audiobooks these days, especially ones that have ensemble casts that come in and kind of each actor narrates a different character in the book. That can be incredibly effective. There are ones such as some Brandon Sanderson novels. They have a male narrator and a female narrator, and I feel that the interplay between them works very, very well. And then you have rare situations where the author themselves provide the best narration possible. If you guys saw my last review, you know that I am a very big Neil Gaiman fan. Now, I have read all of Neil Gaiman's books in paperback. I've never listened to his audiobooks, but I can tell because I've listened to a lot of his interviews. I've listened to his masterclass on writing, and he is a phenomenal narrator. I feel like his voice was just meant to narrate, and particularly to narrate his books. They are perfect. So Neil Gaiman is not going to pop up on this list, but if that's the kind of story that you're interested in and you do want to chew through some audiobooks, I do believe that Neil Gaiman would be a good place to go to. This is simply kind of just a list of the ones that hit me, and exactly like I said in the beginning, I really want you to check out number 1. So without further ado, let's get into the top 5. Number 5, guys, is going to be The Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu. This is not actually just Paper Menagerie. It's called Paper Menagerie and Other Stories. And it's a collection of short stories by him that I really enjoyed because I thought that it gave... The collection of short stories tells a lot about culture, not only in Southeast Asia, but also what it's like for those immigrants to come to North America. The actual story, Paper Menagerie itself, I believe was the only story to win the Hugo, the Nebula, and the World Fantasy Award. So it's no slouch in terms of the power of the story. I thought it was a very impactful story. I did send that story to other people who didn't understand the concept of it and didn't understand why it rang rang so true to other readers, and that's fair. However, if you are part of that demographic, or if you want to kind of expose yourself to what that life experience might be like, I think that these stories are kind of eye-opening. And again, when I'm reading fiction, one of the things that I want to do is I want to involve myself in a story where I can connect on a human level to cultures and people who have experiences different than my own. I feel like that's really, really one of the strengths of fiction that nonfiction doesn't seem to do quite as well. And I thought that Paper Menagerie was really well done in that way. Now, in terms of the production value for Paper Menagerie, it was fairly standard. I thought the narrators did a very good job. I felt like I was captivated. It wasn't too robotic, but it wasn't too overdramatic at the same time. I didn't feel like any of the narration was untrue to what the physical text would have been. So overall, I thought it was a very enjoyable book. Audiobook. Number 4, and to be honest with you, the top 4 could almost be interchangeable, because this one could be number 3 or number 2 for sure, and this would be The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. Just like what I said before in terms of involving myself in a story that I can very deeply connect with the character, while also sharing experiences that are much different to my own, I thought that The Invisible Man was brilliant. I thought that what Ralph Ellison did was create a character that is relatable to anybody, really. Although the character's experience very much tells of what it's like for a black man to exist during that era. I listened to it quite a while ago. I can't remember when it takes place, in the 60s. It's basically a story about a man who just wants to do good. He just wants to go to school. He just wants to be a productive member of society. And no matter where he goes, he feels like he just doesn't fit. It doesn't work out for him. He's being manipulated by all sides, by high white society, by his black brethren once he starts involving himself with that side of things after he's no longer able to go to college. It is a remarkably deep story that I've found myself deeply connected to, and I think it's a very important story for people to read. I really do think that it's stories like these that do a lot more for racial discussion than simply nonfiction books that might lay out certain details about how we should act. I've made reviews about that in the past, about books like that I dislike and books that I do like. And books that I do like are ones like Invisible Man. I thought the narration was really well done. I thought there was passion in the narrator's voice. I felt that there was pain in the narrator's voice when there needed to be pain. Again, it wasn't too overdramatic, and a book like this cannot be read in a robotic manner. It just can't, not without destroying a little bit of what makes the book so great. So I would really, really highly recommend The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, especially if you want to open your eyes to that side of things. Number 3 is an interesting one, and I'm going to explain why this one is one where you would prefer to get the audiobook as opposed to the physical book. And that's going to be, I hope I don't butcher this guy's last name, Blindness by Jose Saramago. Saramago won the Nobel Prize in Literature, so I don't mean to disparage his actual writing in any way. He is phenomenal. The reason why I say to pick up the audiobook instead of the paper book is literary fiction can really play with the limits of the medium, sometimes to its own detriment, in my opinion. So an example of this is if you've seen the movie No Country for Old Men, that is written by an author named Cormac McCarthy. Now, if you read a Cormac McCarthy book, he does not use dialogue tags. So he doesn't use quotation marks around dialogue. He will skip a line for dialogue, but it's really part of the prose itself. So you have to do a little bit of mental work in order to decipher the text. Now, for me, that's not a huge deal, but for some people that is quite annoying because they're just so used to the ease of dialogue tags in terms of the flow of their reading. Now, what Jose Saramago does is take this to the nth degree, and that he barely uses paragraph breaks. He doesn't skip line for dialogue. He includes the dialogue in the actual paragraph, and you just know that it's dialogue because there will be a random capitalized letter at the beginning of a word, and you're like, why is this capitalized? There's no punctuation to let me know that another sentence is beginning, and it's because somebody's talking, and you kind of have to infer that as you're reading, and that takes a lot of mental work. And he has like 2-page long paragraphs. That's kind of the norm in his style of writing. I tried to read The Cave by Saramago, and it was so tedious for me that I really had a hard time getting through it, and I just put it down. However, You don't get any of that when you listen to the audiobooks. Now, what happens in blindness? In blindness, as the title suggests, everybody in the world goes blind. Was it everybody in the world, or was it most of the world? Anyway, at least most of the world goes blind. These people now have to navigate this new world, and you get this incredible tale that really pulls at the extremes of how compassionate humans can be for one another in the face of these extreme circumstances, and also the horror and depths of human depravity that can happen during these, as humans try to take advantage of one another, and then the compassion of other humans kind of hold them together and try to push through that. I think it's an incredible story. I understand why he won the Nobel Prize in Literature. Really hard to read in paperback. Excellent audiobook. And number 2, this is just a personal preference for me. This is one of my favorite books. It's probably my favorite short story collection, and that would be The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury is a writer that you can tell his love for writing, you can tell his love for language, and his unshakable love for story in the way he writes. Some people write and they write cold prose. Some people write and they write very transparent prose where they don't try to do anything with the language at all. And some people, they try to get too flowery. I find that Ray Bradbury, you get a love for story, you get a love for fiction. He breathes it into every page that he has. And I find that The Martian Chronicles is probably my favorite science fiction story or collection of all time. And it's the least scientifically accurate. Fans of hard science fiction will probably scoff at that. However, if you're talking about what Ray Bradbury does, he tells an incredible story of humanity and what the discovery of new land means, what it means to go to a place where people are already inhabiting it, what happens in terms of class warfare when some people try to go and other people don't, and other people can't go. And I think it's a remarkable collection of stories that really touches on human nature in ways that a lot of books kind of skirt around for the sake of novelty or for the sake of the mechanisms within the book that might be fun. I feel like it's really a remarkable tale, and even Borges commended Martian Chronicles, which is rare for somebody in the literary community to look towards science fiction in such a way. Finally, guys, number 1, the actor that you would have never assumed to be a phenomenal audiobook narrator. The book is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey, and the narrator is none other than Dr. Steve Brule. No, I'm kidding. It's John C. Reilly. John C. Reilly has a funny voice, right? He usually plays a funny character. We associate him with Will Ferrell, with Talladega Nights, with Walk Hard. He is hilarious. However, if you've also seen Gangs of New York, if you've seen Boogie Nights, you know he's also a phenomenal actor in dramas if he wants to be. He's got really an incredible range. The character that he narrates in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is somebody who gets put in a mental institution, who is kind of, all these people in the mental institution seem kind of feeble, seem kind of resigned to their fate in the mental institution. John C. Reilly's character, I can't even remember his name, it's the one, and Jack Nicholson played him as well. He's kind of rough around the edges. He seems like, both of my parents when I grew up were factory grunts, and then I spent some time in the factory during the summers to make money for school, and the person John C. narrates reminds me of the people that I met in that factory. Again, rough around the edges, something I just really, really enjoyed. And you don't expect, again, it's such a pleasant surprise when you don't expect something to be that great, and it turns out to be just phenomenal. So that's a 10 out of 10. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey, narrated by John C. Reilly. If you're going to dig into audiobooks and you want to look into maybe the Beat generation, right? Maybe some Jack Kerouac, maybe some William S. Burroughs, if you like a little bit more literary fiction, or maybe if you've been watching, Ratchet? Miss Ratchet? It's the spinoff that Netflix did for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and you want to dig into the original text and see what it's like. If you don't want to burden yourself with reading the book, listen to the audiobook. It really is a treat, and it's just fun to listen to John C. Reilly narrate that one. All right, guys, so that was my 5 favorite audiobooks that I like to listen to. Again, they are not the best audiobooks in the world. They don't have an ensemble cast. Not all of them are even the best produced. So if you have any audiobooks that really stood out to you, please let me know, because I'd love to check them out. And I will catch you guys on the next review. Os.